one myself. We get a lot of audio downloads too, even more than all the video stuff. So, we get a respectable, I
Yeah,
don't know.
our average show actually with audio is about 30,000, 30 to 40,000 listens. So our podcast is bigger than our YouTube, but what we'll do is just on that audio podcast redirect everybody to Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, Chordal to watch the presentation. And we are live. Hey, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and hit record. We got Clint back with us today for an awesome, very important presentation. So I don't want to waste any time. Let's get right into it. Here we go. I'm going to hit record now. And boom, we're back for another episode of AlphaCast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with the fearless captain of the Alfa Vedic ship, Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to
God
you
help us all
live.
if I'm the captain.
White squall, here it comes. Yeah, we're here on the Smith River up in the glorious state of Jefferson, where freedom still reigns supreme. We're going into a holiday weekend, I guess, Bear. So Labor Day. That's a pretty fitting, right, for our
Boy,
talk
we
today.
could do a podcast on Labor Day, huh?
We do
I
actually have
see
a fun.
Clint raising his eyebrows there.
Well, labor is going to be one of the key words today. Different kind
Exactly.
of labor,
That's
slave
why I brought
labor.
it up. And actually, kind of harking back to our first show with you, thinking of labor as in terms of birth. The birth on the ship. You guys, this is our second show with Clint. Someone asked in the chat, where can you find the first one? Well, you can just go to either our website to where all of our alpha casts are on, or just check out your favorite online platform. I blanking right now on what episode that was. It was maybe 3-4 months ago.
It hasn't
But
been censored from DoucheTube yet.
it's still on there. So yeah, we'll just cross our fingers. We'll use our hobo code words as much as we can today. But we do, I was telling Clint before we went on, we do everything we can to make sure our alpha casts are on the interwebs forever. And so I've been uploading all the recent alpha casts to Chordal, which is cool because that's censorship proof. And we're on Rumble and Odyssey and these other platforms as well. But yeah, today we're going to be diving into commerce and the global crime syndicate. And this is some great work that's been very unique to what Clint's been putting out. And we're thrilled to have him on for a part 2 interview. He's the producer of Corporation Nation, and he's going to be sharing his encyclopedic knowledge of how America was conquered under the auspices of citizenship. Our discussion will be central to the loss of sovereignty as we were franchised into a global corporation. We're basically all one large franchise of McDonald's now, huh? Being served Big Macs and Happy Meals. What an ironic name for those, huh? It would surprise most that both international and domestic commerce are conducted within trade zones, also designated as constitutional free zones. Make no mistake, we are presently witnessing the end game of the most diabolical and systematic enslavement of humanity worldwide. Quote, "It is the interest of tyrants to reduce the people to ignorance and vice." It's from Samuel Adams. The full breadth of institutionalized society has been perniciously orchestrated to compromise the minds and bodies of the unaware, to facilitate the culling and obedience of those who will be left, to realize the absolute evil intent of a sociopathic few. Knowledge is key, and the reason why the Alfa Vedic crew is committed to bringing solution through truth to our audience. If any of this seems far-fetched or too conspiratorial, we wish you peace, and may your chains set lightly upon you. Please join us and be part of the solution as we bring Clint on for part 2 here. Dr. Bear, take it away, my friend.
Good. And as we were talking before we went live, maybe do a part 3 and 4 because this information is voluminous. Clint, so much gratitude for you being with us and the work that you're doing. And I've been a follower of your work for a good number of years now. And early 70s, I read a book. What was it called? None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen.
It's
And
on
I've
my
been,
shelf
yeah, and I've been getting in trouble ever
ever
since.
since. Yeah.
So, and I really say that genuinely. I appreciative of your work because you've carried that forth to new levels. And, I have no problem at this point in my life understanding that there's some thirsty psychotics that are orchestrating this. I'm over it. That's fine. But, there's not that many of them. What I really have a problem with is the folks with all of the information that's available from people like yourself that they're still reticent to make change in their own lives first. And I'm kind of old school, but I think the solution, I farm and do a lot of things here. Otherwise, I'd just be inside getting pissed off all the time. I think the solution is the menfolk for just to grow some balls, but I'll defer to folks with a little more knowledge and maybe patience. So let's just kick off with what you're going to talk about today, and we'll try to interrupt. We might have as little as possible, but we might have a few questions along the way. But we're going to try to just let you roll because you've got so much. And what you're starting with today will probably be two parts. So we'll see how much we can get through today. And thanks for being with us again.
Absolutely. In fact, I mean, I don't know how many guests actually request to be back on your show, but I'm one of those people out there that, like yourselves, are censored and all that, deplatformed. So, I mean, I don't really have the opportunity to show this to a lot of people, except the people who've been following me, like you say, for so long that actually know my name. Yeah, otherwise it's really pretty hard to find me out there. Not to mention YouTube taking, as you said, taking down so many videos. They just took down my recent one. So, yeah, it's a strange. I never thought I'd be in a place where I'd be so blatantly censored and not be able to find myself on the internet and stuff like that. So, yeah, very strange. I just couldn't have imagined this would be the case. Um,
Yeah, join the club.
and what you're saying there, yeah, it is. This is a call for action, but it's sort of a different kind of call because what we're dealing with here are companies like Temu, IKEA, pharmaceutical companies, car companies, etc., who utilize this particular method. And we're also talking about the worship of our current president and every other president who've all been successfully, or sorry, succeeding each other in implementing this thing. It is not something, these guys are not in competition, which is actually going to be the presentation after this. Speaking of so-called democracy, but what we're focusing on today is called foreign trade zones, free trade zones, special purpose zones, et cetera, and how what they've done is they've created these areas that are no longer part of countries when it comes to customs and border patrol. So in other words, they can ship anything in, and in once it's in that zone, they can destroy it, they can ship it, they can put the parts together, and most importantly, in case you're curious what the whole tariff thing was and why they were shipping aliens in, um, yeah, that's because if you're working in a foreign trade zone, you're not in America.
You mean we're not on our way to a golden age?
Yeah, it's quite the opposite, actually. It's more like I don't know what's the basest metal you can find, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's pretty bad. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna share my screen and we're just gonna work out of a PowerPoint presentation. You guys can stop me anytime, ask any questions you want, and then cut me off when you're ready to end the show, and we'll do it again as you said. So let's see. The Zoom workplace to share your screen. Oh no. Zoom, yes.
You should be
Sorry.
good. You should be good on our end to be able to share.
It's my settings. I think I need to change. Zoom may not be able to record the contents of your screen until it is quit.
That's okay. I'm recording. I know sometimes it's hard to follow Zoom when it's in all Chinese.
Okay, now, are you seeing that?
We'll give it a
Sharing.
second. Sometimes, yep.
There it goes.
There we go.
All right. Bypass the system. Jeez, it's sorry I'm having security issues here. Allow. Allow the great artificial intelligence in the sky to access everything. So I'm still seeing me in the window. Does that mean, but you're seeing the
Yeah,
presentation?
it might be just your Zoom settings on your end. We do see your presentation in full screen on our
All
end.
right. All right. Well, I'm gonna put you guys aside here and let's see. Okay, so this is about foreign and free trade zones. These are international. I call it international organized crime, or in other words, commerce. As we know, the Commerce Clause is extremely important. Everything the government does that is illegitimate or that is de facto as opposed to de jure, lawful, de facto means illegitimate, has to do with commerce. Commerce is their bread and butter. Um, about half of the U.S. code is de facto because it deals with things that are not governmental, they're administrative. And the difference between those two things is one is executive, one is actually a legitimate purpose for government. What we're going to be talking about today is purely trade, so it's purely commerce. It is purely in the illegitimate realm of government, or what they say is de facto. Um, and so when I say the loss of sovereignty, I mean, it's really difficult to even point to the notion of sovereignty because sovereignty has really been transferred to the United Nations as a talk about a conspiracy. I mean, geez. Um, so it's very sovereignty. When I say a loss of sovereignty, I'm really referring to the fact that these zones, as we're going to be talking, these special purpose areas, even some districts, are no longer considered to be part of the United States or the country they're in for purposes of commerce, for purposes of border uh, uh, customs and border patrol. So that's what I'm talking about here. First, just to give you some background, we need to understand that cities, when we're talking about cities, counties, states, I did my corporation nation, as you mentioned. It You have to realize that these are all corporations. They're called municipal corporations, and they serve a dual purpose. Again, legitimate and illegitimate. One for general governing purposes. You know, then there's this illegitimate function, and that's why they incorporate. So you can see that this particular picture says it was established in 1871, but incorporated 1947. I was sitting at the bus stop in Chicago not too long ago, and there was the Chicago seal, and it said incorporated in whatever 18 something. And this is what my whole point was, that the nation is full of corporations, not states, not cities, not counties, not districts, but actual corporations. Now, the definition of that is, of course, well, this is an example. When you go and you understand that a corporation then is something that can be sued because it is a person, associations, corporations, individuals, etc. We call them artificial persons. Fine. Aggregates, right, of people who represent themselves as one entity or one body corporate. So Utah County, a body corporate and politic of the state, in other words, a corporation. Orem City, a municipal corporation of the state of Utah. Payson City, a municipal corporation of the state of Utah, and Pleasant Grove City, municipal corporation of the state of Utah. When I got a traffic ticket, it basically said that I had to pay the Salt Lake City Corporation, which was my first clue back in 2010 or so that this was how things actually worked, that there was no actual city, that this is a fictional entity. Um, and, it said govern myself accordingly, which really pissed me off. And so I made the corporation nation. Supreme Court of the state of Utah, again, Utah County, a body corporate, Orem City, etc. Just so you understand that when these guys are represented, they are representing themselves as corporation because that's the only thing they can. That's the only way they can actually appear in court is through a corporate body. Just like you cannot appear in court unless you have or appear as a fictional person or the agent thereof, attorney, in other words. So municipal corporation, a public corporation created by government for political purposes, having subordinate and local powers of legislation. The municipal function, what is it there for? Granted, it's created by the state or with permission of the state. Nothing is independent. Granted for a special benefit and advantage of the urban community, embraced within the corporate boundaries. So when you're going in and you see city limits or corporate limits, I was surprised to see that too. Yeah, you're entering into a different corporation. We call that a city, but that's actually a municipal corporation, the limits. Sometimes called a private function as distinguished from a public or government function. Okay, now we're getting into the de facto, the illegitimate, and the legitimate. Public governmental function would be something that is legitimate, whereas private would be your commerce. One is conferred or imposed on municipality as a local agency of limited and prescribed jurisdiction to be employed in administering the affairs of the state and promoting the public welfare generally. Municipal affairs, that's when we're talking about internal business affairs of a municipality. So here's where it gets interesting. Again, if you think about, okay, I'm going to sue the city, well, I have to sue something, so it has to be a person, because that's the only thing you can sue. So when I sue a city, county, a state, etc., the government, Washington, D.C., etc., corporate legal individual, a municipal corporation possesses two kinds of power, governmental and public, proprietary and private. That means property. And in exercise of the former, governmental and public, the corporation is merely a municipal government, not something that you can say, I'm going to take you to court. It's doing government, it's doing legitimate things. Whereas to the later, the proprietary and the private, dealing with property, commerce, in other words, money, and things that are private, meaning privy, things that they're privy to. It is a corporate legal individual. So when you're going to sue the city, you're suing the city in one of two hats. You can only sue it as a corporate legal individual, just like I can only sue you. I cannot take the man to court. I have to take his status, his person, where everything exists in the fiction. That's why it's important to understand what the straw man is. A perfectly legitimate legal term, by the way. You can look it up in dictionaries. Municipal affairs, the term referring to the internal business affairs. Let's see, political corporation, a public or municipal corporation for political purposes, the administration of governmental powers of a subordinate or local nature. Now, when we live in a state, we are enfranchised in that state. Remember what the Constitution says, and this goes out to people, sorry to burst your bubble, but if you consider yourself a state national or anything even similar to that, this is an oxymoron. You cannot be a citizen of a state and not of the nation. The nation owns all territory. Sorry, not possible. You cannot be you cannot be a citizen of a state and not be a citizen of the nation. Citizenship is not it's not a voluntary thing. You're born into it. It's slavery, right? It's to put it mildly. It's called enfranchisement. So when they freed the slaves, they enfranchised them into the corporation, which is the nation, and they incorporated the man into society or the body politic. What's the state of Utah? It's a body politic. So that's what free means, and that's what my next presentation is going to be, so that you understand that freedom is legal, not real. All these things that we confuse with natural or inherent rights cannot be confused with the legal version, the illegitimate version. And that's what I'm trying to get you to always separate is what is real, what is fiction, what is legitimate, what is commerce. And everything they've got us now that everything we do is commerce because we operate through these persons. Essentially, Clint Richardson is I mean you could say it's a corporation, more like a company. If I want to open a company in my name, do business as, I can do that. It's just not a corporation because it's not more than one person or one entity forming that thing. So we call it a natural person. But in legal, there's no such thing as nature because legal is always fiction. So it's a term to represent the individual as opposed to the aggregate. So, and in order to close a corporation, in other words, if you all stop supporting this crap, the dissolution of a corporation or a city is the termination of its existence as a body politic, and it goes on. So now that we have an idea of what cities are, right? So we have a bunch of corporations littering the entire canvas of the United States. Here's the map. Most people, I think, especially in this group, this loop, are familiar with the Constitution Free Zone, 100-mile border zone. Also includes all airports and other inland ports. Okay, so when you're in an airport, you're in a so-called Constitution Free Zone. This has to do strictly with border customs and border patrol. Constitution Free Zones, you have no rights there. The Constitution doesn't apply. Not that it applies to you anyway, because you're persons of the United States, not Americans. You've been incorporated, so inherent rights is what the Constitution protects, and you've given those up. So when we talk about this, searches and seizures, warrants, etc., this is what the Border Patrol is abusing within 100 miles of any border. The Supreme Court has devised a balancing test for privacy rights where the border is concerned. Under this test, an entrant's privacy rights are weighed against the government's security interests at the border. Accordingly, the Supreme Court has held that individuals have a reduced expectation of privacy at the border because the government's interest in monitoring and controlling entrants outweighs an individual's privacy interests. Okay, privacy. Well, that's commercial. The court's finding renders routine searches without warrant, probable cause, or reasonable suspicion at the border inherently reasonable and thus justified. The court created principles called the border search exception and applies only to the narrow purpose of enforcing immigration and customs laws, which entails ensuring that required duties are paid on imported goods. It's all about the commerce, and that harmful goods and people do not enter the country. Now, I want you to remember this statement because when it's you, this is what they do. Okay? When it's you, they're all about enforcing customs laws, getting those taxes and those tariffs and all those things. And if you open a business, God forbid, you're going to be paying them, right? And that harmful goods and people do not enter the country. That's their stated purpose. But you see, that doesn't apply in what we are going to be talking about. Federal regulation gives Customs Border Patrol broad authority to conduct warrantless searches in the name of national security. As a result, areas within 100 miles of the country's northern and southern borders are rendered Constitution-free zones. Due to this inclusion, you might you might think about how close you are to the ocean. Due to the inclusion of ocean and waterways, coastal regions, including the East Coast cities of Washington, D.C., New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, large sections of California, Oregon, and Washington on the West Coast are also subject to a diminished level of constitutional protection. They've also have virtually unchecked authority in the entire states of Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Hawaii, Maine, and Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Vermont. This is the majority of the population, of course, because we live within 100 miles of it's like 2/3 of the population. Because these states are all within 100 miles of the border. CBP, Customs Border Patrol agents also have authority to use race and ethnicity factors to stop and search people in these zones. These areas are called Constitution-free zones because They frequently disregard the Constitution, especially the Fourth Amendment protections, while operating in these areas. Now, again, this is all background to what we're going to be talking about because this is where all these authorities are coming from. Borders, Customs and Borders Control, as well as all government agencies, can selectively enforce the law, and that's what they've done. Also, I want you to understand that when we're talking about so-called waterways, ports, inland ports, well, how can you have a port inland if there's no water? Well, that's airports and all these different ports that they have around the country, which we'll show you a map of a little later. You have to understand that they have done this thing called virtual water. Virtual water, because you can't really, when you're talking about water, it's not something that can be owned. It's not land, right? So water is sort of considered a universal thing. When you go out into the ocean a certain way, you're in international waters. Waters not being doesn't mean water. It means legally you're in a zone that is considered international. All right. So what they've done is they've made you have the NAFTA superhighways, which have since been replaced with something else. I can't remember the name of it right now. All these highways that go from country to country, Mexico to Canada, etc., cross country, etc., from ocean to ocean or port to port, because ports aren't in the United States. Well, I can go from Mexico and I could build parts in Mexico. I can deliver them to, uh, uh, let's say Salt Lake City in our port using the whatever freeway, and then continue to Canada, and I've never entered the United States. Why? Well, I've only driven on a virtual waterway, which is considered international, and I've only stopped in a port of an inland port, which is not considered part of the United States, and then I've driven through to Canada, which is not considered part of the United States. So you can imagine the kinds of things that are being brought into the country where Customs and Border Patrol says, we're not looking. We're not checking your cargo. We're not, you have special privileges. We don't need to look through your big storage bins that are coming in from China, etc., etc. Because congratulations, you've chosen what we're promoting, which is foreign trade zones. And you don't have to pay tariffs because you're not in the United States. Now, we're talking about the history of, again, why this has happened. What has brought us to this point where we're talking about massive swaths of the United States that aren't considered part of the United States, just like the Constitution free zones, right? Not part of the United States for purposes of Customs and Border Patrol, in other words, commerce. So, President Trump's used the national emergency. This is something that's been going on for a long time. We're going to talk about that. Um, he issued 3 executive orders to impose tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and the People's Republic of China. This was a while ago. Um, International Emergency Economic Powers Act, National Emergencies Act, etc. Trade Act, right? All about trade, right? All about commerce. To declare and reiterate a national emergency under the NEA and IEEPA. And the excuse is the extraordinary threat posed by illegal aliens and drugs, including deadly fentanyl. This, of course, being the thing that the government was sponsoring, putting them on buses and planes and bringing them into cities. Why in the hell would government bring in known, unregistered, so-called aliens into the United States if they're not, and keep them keep them so-called illegal, as we understand the word? Well, because they're never entering the United States. They're traveling on international roadways, waterways, as they say, virtual waterways, and they're traveling to inland ports. And I'm going to show you a map that's going to prove that point. It's pretty frightening. And of course, fentanyl is being shipped through foreign trade zones. Uh, Again, we'll talk about that. So, a little bit of history on the emergency powers. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, Back in the 1973, they had a special committee on the termination of national emergency. This started about 1933. Actually, the first one was declared by Lincoln when the Union split, and in order to preserve the Union, it wasn't to keep slavery, it was to, or to get rid of slavery. It was to preserve the Union because the Confederate States, as they called them, Confederation meaning a conspiracy against the United States, that was unacceptable. That was United States territory. They conquered it, so called. And so the war was to take the territory back. This is why, again, California cannot secede. It's 34% federal territory. So it would be impossible to actually do that. And it would cause a war, a civil war. Civil war is not about anything but preserving the Union. And if you don't understand what that means, the United States is basically a trade union. That's what countries are. That's what nation states are, essentially. And that's why they call it a union. And if you compare what a union is, workers' unions, all these things, again, that's something we'll talk about in a future presentation. So basically, Congress got together and said, "Well, look, these emergency powers are just too great. We really should see if there's something we can do about it." And they made a couple changes, but they certainly didn't get rid of the power of national emergency. About the only thing they really did was say you have to redeclare it every year. Okay, special report on the termination of the United States, a national emergency in the United States. Since now, I want you to listen to this very carefully because this is your true government. Okay, again, there's a set of laws that are in place in peacetime. Peace meaning free-flowing commerce. That's all they care about. And then there is a second set of laws, which is essentially the Communist Manifesto come to life. That only applies when a national emergency is declared. All the power of the executive is in full force, meaning the doctrine of necessity applies, which means there's no law. Necessity negates law. Okay, so when a national emergency is declared, the laws that would apply normally to whatever the emergency is are null and void, and a new set of laws, presidential elect directives, executive orders, etc., are put into place. All of these are the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. Just so you understand, since March the 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. In fact, there are now in effect 4 presidentially proclaimed states of national emergency back then. These proclamations give force to 470 provisions of federal law that does not exist unless an emergency is declared because an emergency nullifies the Constitution and the law. These hundreds of statutes delegate to the president extraordinary powers ordinarily exercised by the Congress, which affect the lives of American citizens in a host of all-encompassing manners. This vast range of powers, taken together, confer enough authority to rule the country without reference to normal constitutional processes. Let me say it again. Since March the 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. And guess what? We're still there. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all of their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental, this is 1973, for 40 years, federal freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have, in varying degrees, been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. The problem of how a constitutional democracy reacts to great crisis, however, far antedates the Great Depression. As a philosophical rule, or issue, its origins reach back to the Greek city-states and the Roman Republic. Surprise! That's where citizenship came from, actually. When Rome conquered people, they made them citizens. That's where you are. And in the United States, actions taken by the government in times of great crisis have, from at least the Civil War, the first one in the United States to start the Civil War, in important ways shaped the present phenomenon of a permanent state of national emergency. This has not changed, guys. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and, in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all American citizens. This is your Congress telling you this. And yes, most of that is part of the Communist Manifesto. Right there in that one sentence, you've covered about 7 of the planks of the Communist Manifesto. And yes, these laws are very, very prevalent now, way more than there was back then. There's uh, there's no present need for the United States government to continue to function under emergency conditions. The Special Committee on the Termination of National Emergency was created to examine the consequences of terminating the declared states of national emergency that now prevail, to recommend what steps the Congress should take to ensure that that termination can be accomplished without adverse effects upon the necessary tasks of government. Now remember, when we say necessary, that means lawlessness. That means the doctrine of necessity knows no law. Okay? That's what they're comparing it to. So they brought together the body of statutes which were passed by Congress. So Congress fully aware. This comes from Congress. Congress has given the authority to do this to the president. They control it. And yet they act, when the president acts on the executive order, they pretend like their hands are tied. It's really, it's a great little conspiracy. It's a great little BS, delusion that they're putting over you. Conferring extraordinary powers upon the executive branch in times of national emergency. This has been a most difficult task. Nowhere in the government, in either the executive or legislative branches, did there exist a complete catalog of all the emergency statutes. That should comfort you. Many were aware that there had been a delegation of an enormous amount of power, but how much power no one knew. And I'd say that's probably where we're at, most of us today. And this goes on. This just gives you a little more. Uh, it tells you that this is goes back to the Great Depression, Greek city-states, etc., Civil War, and that we've been in this permanent state of emergency. But it goes to Locke, who argued that the threat of a national crisis, unforeseen, sudden, and potentially catastrophic, required the creation of broad executive power. Executive means force. Okay, Congress passes the law, the executive enforces them. But when the executive is passing the law and enforcing them, what do you have? No longer a constitutional republic, which we haven't had for many, many decades, and I'd say since the Civil War, honestly. Now this goes back, especially because the year was 1933. This was all Roosevelt, um, who was disputed by Taft. Taft responded that the wide field of action that this would give the executive when they were debating this, uh, one can hardly limit. A president can exercise no power which cannot fairly and reasonably be traced to some specific grant of power. Now, as I said, Congress has granted this power. So we're not talking about anything that's illegitimate. In fact, every country and every constitution in the world can be suspended. Roosevelt and his successor, Harry S. Truman, invoked formal states of emergency to justify extensive delegations of authority during actual times of war. When an emergency is declared, it is a declaration of war. Emergency and war are the same thing, basically. And all it is, like, it's a war against COVID, the war against the flu, or whatever, the war against this. So it's the war against whatever the emergency. So the war against terrorism, not a country, not a people, not a place. So broad executive power to basically say everybody is a terrorist. Korean War, etc. Um, don't really need to. The Cold War atmosphere, which until recent years made the imminent threat of hostilities an accepted fact of everyday life, with emergency the normal state of affairs. But they're saying, hey, we didn't really need that. Presidents have exercised numerous powers, most notably under the Trading with the Enemy Act. legitimated by that ongoing state of national emergency. What is the Trading with the Enemy Act? An illegitimate law that exists only because there is a state of national emergency, a permanent state of national emergency, which nullifies the Constitution and the laws and whatever else has to do with that particular thing. Hundreds of others have lain fallow, and there's to be an exercise at any time requiring only an order from the president. At any time, our current president, which is in office, not a man, doesn't matter who is the president, doesn't matter who the king is. Long live the king, right? The king is dead, long live the king. Well, the president, what do you think an election is? Election is just the election of a king, and we don't even elect the president. The electors do. And Baudrillard actually called it John Baudrillard called it a mock execution. See, people, we don't behead the king anymore because every 4 or 8 years we get to re-elect a new president. It's like a pretend execution, basically. We're so mad, can't wait for the next president. Well, that meant chopping off the head of the king, but now we just have to. Oh well, in 4 more years, no, it's not going to happen. 4 more years, you're going to get another guy who's going to do the same exact thing because they're not you. They're not. You are a class that is lower than them. They are the elect. So no, waiting for the next president ain't going to do anything. Going to continue this as they all do. They each continue each other's executive orders. Okay, every year. Because that's the only thing this actual congressional session here did, really. They didn't change anything. Now, here's another important part when it comes to the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, that the travel of aliens to and from the United States may be controlled when the United States is at war or during the existence of any national emergency proclaimed by the president. Huh. Oh, so really, they were doing absolutely nothing that was illegal because how can it be illegal if we're in a state of national emergency? Invoking a national emergency, the executive order. The executive order declares a national emergency. It ensures that DHS, Department of Homeland Security, which I believe is where border control is, has all the flexibility it needs to operate air missions near the border, etc. Under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to combat the extraordinary threat to U.S. national security, including our public health posed by unchecked drug trafficking. Unchecked. I sorry, I don't want to even get ahead of myself. The flow of contraband drugs like fentanyl in the United States through illicit distribution networks has created a national emergency. You can't even imagine the illicit network that is created through foreign trade zones and free trade zones. No customs, no border patrol. I mean, talk about creating a pathway for illicit drugs, money laundering, child laundering, trafficking, traffic, another word for commerce. Okay, emergency powers. Now, you got to understand that how Hitler took control was through the declaration of emergency to suspend, yes, the Constitution. Okay, every country has a constitution. We're not special. There's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of constitutions throughout the history. They serve a very important purpose, which is to be suspended. Germany has avoided them ever since, these national emergencies. Hitler used the Constitution to shatter the Constitution. It's how Hitler dismantled democracy in 53 days, and one of the most astonishing political transformations in history of democracy. Again, the subject of further discussion later. Hitler set about destroying a constitutional republic. Oh, wait, that's what we have. Through constitutional means. What follows is a step-by-step account of how Hitler systematically disabled and then dismantled his country's democratic structures and processes in less than 2 months' time. Specifically, 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 days, 8 hours and 40 minutes. The minutes mattered. Anyway, President Trump's declaration of national emergency to seek funds for building a wall relies on that 1976 National Emergencies Act, which was passed after this 1973 uh, 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 the thing we just read, when Congress got together to decide what they were going to do, which gives presidents sweeping powers to address what they declare are urgent crises. Well, so apparently they didn't do anything about it. Like I said, the only thing they did is make them redeclare it every year. But for a historian of modern Germany, it's impossible to avoid recalling the way emergency declarations unsettled the Weimar Republic after World War I. Their constitution, like ours, had classically liberal aspects. Classical liberalism, not the same as what we call liberal today, that guaranteed freedom of speech, assembly, religion, and the right to private property. As I'm going to discuss later, these are, okay, remember, the word freedom does not mean natural freedom. It means one and only one thing when it comes to the legal realm. It means franchise. A franchise is something given to you that can be taken away. And I want you to understand that, especially when a war or a national emergency is declared. Freedom is not true freedom. To be free, you would have to not be part or a person of the United States, right? Someone in another country is free from the United States. We are in franchise of it. And the distinction between those two understandings, again, real and fiction, is so important. Near Civil War conditions between the right and left, it also gave the nationally elected president the power to dissolve the parliament and hold a new election within 60 days. This could happen here very easily. It's Article 48 gave the president the power if public security and order were seriously disturbed or endangered within the German Reich, kind of like what Trump declared and every other president, to use the armed forces to restore them or suspend for a while in whole or in part fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution, such as freedom of assembly and speech. Remember, that means franchise, not freedom. If it was freedom, they couldn't do anything about it. If it was an unalienable right, couldn't do anything about it, which is why they don't use the word unalienable. They use inalienable, which the courts have decided means you can sell your unalienable rights in exchange for legal rights, artificial franchises. Keep in mind that voting is called a franchise. I mean, that's a kind of a well-known thing. Same thing with England, Defense of the Realms Act in 1914. Call it DORA, and this just goes on to basically say the same thing. It is how the Queen can declare DORA, can declare a national emergency and suspend Parliament, do everything that Hitler did and everything that any president of the United States can do. Okay, this is not unique to any country. This is the purpose of having a constitution, because a constitution is very much like any other corporate document. It can be suspended, as we just saw. You remember, the United States is a corporation. Plain and simple. I'll just leave this up for a second. You can read it later if you want, but it's the same exact thing. Again, this is a worldwide phenomenon that government can be and constitutions can be suspended. Now we finally get to U.S. foreign trade zones. So we have this background, right? We understand that certain things have happened to implement a set of laws that would allow something like this to exist, right? Secure areas, a foreign trade zone in the United States only, are secure areas under supervision of U.S. Customs and Border Protection that are considered outside the customs territory of the United States for the purposes of duty payment, located in or near customs port of entry. Again, that's all ports, that's airports, any other shipping ports, etc. They are the U.S. version of what are known internationally as free trade zones. Every other country, free trade zone. Authority for establishing these facilities is granted by the Foreign Trade Zones Board under the Foreign Trade Zones Act of, look at there, 1934. 1933 was all the stuff we were just talking about when Roosevelt wanted broad authority to declare these national emergencies. As amended, meaning it's congressional. The executive secretary of the board, located within enforcement and compliance of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Oh, Commerce in Washington, D.C. Um, Foreign and domestic merchandise may, subject to FTC board and CBP regulations, be moved into zones for operations not otherwise prohibited by law, involving storage, exhibition, assembly, manufacturing, and processing. The one thing you cannot do in a foreign trade zone, very simply, is sell. Once you put it outside of the foreign trade zone into the commercial market, that's when all the taxes, tariffs, fees, fines, duties apply. While they're in the zone, absolutely nothing. All zone activity is subject to public interest review, and all production activity requires a case-by-case review. Under zone procedures, the usual formal customs entry procedure and payment of duties are not required on the foreign merchandise unless and until it enters customs territory for domestic consumption. If you sell a product, you pay, in which case the importer may have a choice of paying duties either on the original foreign materials or the finished product. Okay, so let's take Tesla, because of course Tesla was, Elon Musk, great supporter of the tariffs. Why? Because he doesn't pay hardly any tariffs. He has gigafactories, factories that build his little electric toys in all these different countries: Canada, New York, uh, Mexico, and Monterey. And he's the only white guy in China building cars that actually are used in China. Everything else is state owned or private families in China. Imagine that. So, what's actually happening is I import products from Mexico, and I import stuff from China, and I import stuff from another country out of a free trade zone, and I have them all in a foreign trade zone in, let's say, Salt Lake City. And so they're flying into the airports, they're being shipped and driven on roads that are not considered United States. They all end up in a port, which is not part of the United States because it is operating in a foreign trade zone. And let's say then I put together a car. Okay, well, now Tesla has just avoided all tariffs and taxes, and they've put together their cars. Well, now what? Well, now they ship those cars to Canada, and because they've done this, they're paying no tariffs, taxes, fees, fines for all of that all of that commerce, putting the cars together here, assembled here, and then selling them in Canada. Why do they do that? Well, because there's no, you can't, if you sell them here, they're going to have to pay for all those parts. And so you have a choice. You can pay for the parts or you can pay for the final product. A lot of times you'll see products that say assembled in America, but everything came from China, Bangladesh, etc., Vietnam, all those free trade zones. Okay, so yeah, I can choose to pay the tariffs or the duties, the taxes on the parts, or I can choose to pay it on the now rendered product. And that's often cheaper. You're only paying for one thing as opposed to all the individual parts. So this is what they're promoting, and they want businesses to do. They want you to operate outside of the United States. The problem with that is foreign trade zones are usually, especially in other countries, free trade zones usually don't employ people from their own country. It's really bizarre, and we'll get into that. Um, so, for domestic consumption, in which case the importer may have a choice of paying duties either on the original foreign materials, the parts, or the finished product. Domestic goods moved into a zone for export are considered exported upon entering the zone for purposes of excise tax, rebates, and drawback. The benefits obtained through FTZ foreign trade zone procedures help encourage UX activity, employment, and value added, often in competition with foreign alternatives. These sites and foreign trade zones and activities remain within the jurisdiction of federal, state, and local government agencies, all of which are de facto corporations, exercising administrative ministerial, in other words, function, their illegitimate function, private commercial function. Foreign trade zone is created when local organizations such as a city, county, or port authority, corporations, apply to the FTZ board for a grant to establish and operate a zone to serve a specifically defined geographical area. And man, when you see the area, you're going to be really shocked. Open approval of the zone by the FTZ board, the organizations become known as FTZ grantees. Okay, so they're now in a position of being the trustor. Um, Grantees are then able to submit applications to the board to establish sites or subzones for use by companies in that area. Under the FTZ Act, grantees are required to operate their zones as public utilities and provide uniform treatment under like conditions to companies using the zone. How do they fund these? You're paying for them, folks. Not benefiting you, but you're paying for them. Here's just an example. Top 25 production operations using a specific zone. I don't remember which zone this was, but you notice that it's pharmaceutical companies, oil companies, automobile companies, petroleum, a lot of metals. The metals market around the world. China, we ship our recycled metal to China, etc. Well, yeah, they use these so they don't have to pay for that kind of the duties and the taxes and etc. But I just want you to know that most pharmaceuticals, every automobile company, including Tesla, which is the one I'm focusing on. In Alabama, top foreign status products by value, vehicle parts, electrical machinery, metals and minerals, aircraft and spacecraft, textiles and footwear, etc. Merchandise received 25,000 to 50 million, exports of 5 to 10 million. Anyway, if you look at what all activity is, when we say 1,000 million, we're talking about a billion. So 1 billion to 5 billion or 1,000 million. With the exports at 500 to 750 million, with 3,000 employees, number of operations 4, merchandise received 100 to 250 million, exports 0. The point is that they are paying no fees. They're paying nothing because it's a foreign trade zone. How then is this happening? Well, we discussed that when we're talking about something private, we're talking about a commercial function. Good old George Bush Sr., Executive Order 12803. He created this 1993, I believe. Infrastructure privatization. This is a very disturbing thing. Privatization means the disposal or transfer of an infrastructure asset, something that you and your forefathers have paid for through taxation, such as by sale or long-term lease from a state or local government to a private party. Now, if you take something like Chicago, where you're paying $30 an hour to park at a meter, or you're going through checkpoints, in other words, toll booths, right? What privatization is, it's not that the government is selling off the infrastructure. They create what's called a public-private partnership, PPPs. And so they'll say, okay, JP Morgan Chase, you're going to give us a couple $1 billion, and we're going to pay some bills or invest it in something else. And we're going to give you the right, the private right to run these toll booths and these parking meters and garages. So they're still public, but they're being run privately. And we're not going to limit you as to what you charge these a-hole people who allow this to happen because they just don't seem to know or care. So we're paying these outrageous prices. JP Morgan Chase, over the next 10 years, which is what the contract is, as the private part of the public-private partnership, runs the toll booth, runs the parking meters, and they proceed to make $10 billion over the next 10 years. And so basically what government did was they said, well, if you give us 2 billion, we'll let you make 10 billion. All about commerce. And that's why you're paying these outrageous prices for water, sewer, gas. All these things have been privatized. They're run by districts. Private corporations are hired to do the management, the administration. You guys have no clue this is happening, and yet this has been happening. Well, this was 1992 actually that he passed this. I mean, infrastructure asset means any asset financed in whole or in part by the federal government. That's, well, I mean, just about everything, because as a city, in order to get the funny money and have all the privileges, you take federal funding, which is why you're bound by federal law most of the time and needed for the functioning of the economy. So these are all public assets. Examples of such assets include, but are not limited to, roads, tunnels, bridges, electricity supply facilities, mass transit, rail transportation, airports, ports, waterways, that can be freeways too, water supply facilities, recycling and wastewater treatment facilities, solid waste disposal facilities, housing, schools, prisons, heard about prison privatization, and even hospitals. And
Well,
you
and
wonder,
now Trump's pushing this towards the national parks too. This has been a big issue.
sure, you consider it what is a national park? It's federally owned territory. It is not part of the state, right? Not that any part of the state really is. In reality, again, think about the Civil War, right? Think about the fact that 83% of Utah is federal territory, federal land. 87% of Nevada, 34% of California, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, you are again, territory territory can only exist by either being conquered or purchased, and those two words mean the same thing. I either conquer the land or as territory by force or by voluntary commerce, in other words, but it means the same thing. Okay? All states, all territories were first purchased or conquered, and then states were created. It's all federal territory if you want to be. So, and you can look in your state constitutions where it states very clearly that all public lands were given to the United States. Every constitution, every state constitution says that. So, and they're not going to let that go. Um,
There's no such thing as an actual public land
well, I
in
mean,
that
it's
sense because of what we were talking about with the municipality of the element around the corporation. Yes, they act in
mhm.
two different ways, but the private side that has to do with commerce and land.
Sure,
So in
and
essence,
no matter where you are, you're in a county. You could be in an unincorporated. They call them unincorporated areas.
well, that's
Um,
what I was also going to ask Clint because I live in an unincorporated
sure,
township.
sure, but you're still in a corporate county.
Yeah,
So
it's nested.
your law enforcement is provided by the county, I would assume,
Yep.
as a contract, right? So yeah, I mean it's good and it's bad. For instance, here when the people in the unincorporated areas were handed a new tax called the police protection tax, they hired all these basically all they basically looked like yeah, I mean, escaped convicts, and they were the new uh, police. The sheriff was turned into a corporation, so the only actual office of sheriff was sheriff, and all the deputies were turned into municipal police. They were pissed because they wanted to be sheriffs, right? They wanted to be part of this legitimate system, and they all got so everybody had to pay the corporate tax to the new tax because they created this police protection outfit, which is a district, which is a corporation. And that district can be, you can live in 100 districts. You live in a trash district. You live in this district, school district, right? Every one of those has a tax. And they can declare a district anytime, any place, anywhere and the borders. So if you don't, what they do is it's very important is if you don't pay your fee, police protection fee, They say, well, okay, it was only $112. Gee, why didn't you want to pay it? Well, since you didn't pay it, we put it on your property tax. It is now a lien against your house. Guess what happens if you don't pay your property tax? They take your house to pay for the fee that you didn't want to pay. You have no freedom. Freedom is, again, you're in a franchise. There's no tax avoidance. The tax protest is a lie. Everything is a lie. All the patriot nonsense, the mythology that we have, mixing up inherent rights with legal rights, that's our problem. We don't understand. We're in a legal situation. There's no getting around it. We are a conquered people. The territory is a conquered area. It is a requirement of the United Nations to be a member of the United Nations to have conquered the people and the territory. I don't know what else to say except that to make you understand that we're in an open air debtor's prison, basically. Okay,
And
and
Clint, I've also had a little bit of a problem with the more recent evolution of I don't know what to call it, the patriot movement, or free commerce, or whatever you want to think of it as, but it's under the term of equity
it's all
and
fraud.
staying in honor. you know, how
Well,
how
so
on earth do you stay in honor
yeah, I
with
mean that's like going to court and swearing on the Bible to tell the truth in a court, which is a lie. It's a fiction. How do I tell the truth in a fictional place? Right? Everything is just ass backwards, right? So, but when you're talking about things like that, look, I've been through it all. I have looked into it all. Tax protest, the equity, discharge, all of that is fraud. It is listed on the FBI website as fraud. Sovereign citizens, state nationals. What's her name? Von Reitz created the term state national. She admits it. Okay, she invented the word. It is not a recognized term. Okay, it doesn't exist. But all these people subscribe to it, right? They even get little identification cards, which mean absolutely nothing. Put little private plates on your car. It means absolutely nothing. That's not how it works when you're in prison. So, yeah, it's all fraud. When you're talking about equity, okay, again, equity is something that you would do to someone else. All right? That would be an equity situation basically means that money is not involved. So the equity jurisdiction was merged with the commercial jurisdiction, right? The court of record and the court of whatever it is, I can't remember. These jurisdictions were merged. So when you go to court, you are in you are if you go to court and you're dealing with strictly monetary function, that is a purely commercial administrative thing. You're not in an actual court, etc. Okay? When you seek equity, you're not seeking a monetary reward. You're not seeking reward, you're seeking equity. That means that the court would actually say, okay, you need to rectify what you did. You need to go build a new house for this person because you burnt his down. You need to go actually do something. The courts don't practice equity because that means the court would then have to follow and make sure that the equity is being done. It's not a monetary thing. It's a physical penance. It's like a you actually have to work and do something. Whereas the courts can deal in money, charge all this money, create what's called the court registry investment system, throw all that money in the investment system, and constantly circulate money in and out, which is in investments, right? So that's how they fund their pensions and how they pay themselves. It's a private enterprise because you're dealing in administrative or private kind of situation. You're not in a legitimate court. When you go to court, there are no legitimate courts. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a patriot mythology. The best thing you can do is not go to court. You don't want to be in a court. Unless you're murder or something like that, everything can be taken care of through the mail mostly. That's why the mail will never go away. It's their weak point basically. But anyway, equity is not a thing that is outside of their system. So yeah, this is all fraud. The whole as you say, the whole commercial redemption. I mean, like I said, I come to call it the false redemption movement because you're missing the whole point that the only thing that's going to redeem you is the law of nature, not non-participation in all this fiction. That's the only redemption there is. You're not going to redeem yourself. What do they say? There's no legal solution for a spiritual problem, right? So all your problems come from commerce. That's why they control it. That's why they force it on you. That's why they give you a commercial entity. State and local governments means the government of any state in the United States, District of Columbia, any Commonwealth, territory, or possession of the United States, etc., etc. Municipalities, city, township, they're all the same thing. Um, Instrumentally of the local government, federally recognized Indian tribe, consistent with the principles of federalism enumerated in Executive Order number 12612. Okay, the fundamental principles of this are an executive order, not a law passed by Congress, but an executive order de facto under emergency law or war passed by the president in order to allow the private sector to provide for infrastructure modernization and expansion. State and local governments should have greater freedom, franchise, to privatize infrastructure assets. Again, everything around you is being sold off to private interests, and your prices have gone way up. This is why. Over this period of time, this is what's happening, and this is also allowing this massive move to foreign trade zones and free trade zones. Um, Private enterprise. Private enterprise. It talks about private, because that's where commerce is going on in this case. And when we're talking about private enterprise, we're talking about government private enterprise. They have enterprise funds where they put all your tax money so they don't have to spend it on you. They invest it. Okay, that's the whole CAFR thing, Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports, that shows that government has investments in every corporation in the world, mostly majority investments, and therefore elects. They're the ones that elect the board of directors. It's all one big corporate entity. You can't really think of it as anything else.
Since you mentioned CAFR, can you maybe just quickly go over the difference between the two sets of books and what we're presented in the public as a budget?
Yeah, it's real simple, actually. The budget report is for the year. The CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is the audit of every asset in government. So it shows all the investments, all the savings, everything, right? So what they present to us is the budget every year. Oh boy, God, we're low on the budget for the year, so we're gonna have to increase taxes to pay for the. Meanwhile, in the CAFR, the actual audit of everything they have and all the investments, they have billions and billions. I mean, every country, or excuse me, every city, every county, every state could be out of debt tomorrow if you simply took all those investments and paid off all the debt. I mean, that's the truth of the matter, is that they have more in investments, etc., bonds, stocks. They invest in everything. All the bad derivatives, all the mortgage-backed securities. You'd be shocked at what's funding the Social Security fund, which is all toxic debt. In other words, it's a IOUs. So the money that's funding Social Security is the money that we're all paying on all these loan contracts and bad debt, toxic debt. That's what funds these things. So billionaires are made because they know the secret that to become a billionaire, you invest in debt. Okay? You don't invest in stocks, you invest in debt, because when you invest in debt, you're not only getting the right to foreclose in some cases, but you're also getting all the interest that's going to uh, come at that point for the next 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And then you can sell that asset and say only charge 15 years of interest. And then they've got a product that's going to make them 30 years of interest. You see, and you keep hypothecating, and you suddenly turn this one mortgage into billions and billions of dollars by re-hypothecating, reselling at a higher price or a lower price, whatever. It's ridiculous the way this works, but this is how government is funded. They invest
Well,
in each other's debt.
we have Alexander Hamilton's famous quote, right? And national debt, if it's not too excessive, will be to us a national blessing, or believe it was something around that. And the idea of building a credit system. I mean, this goes back to the very beginning of this country.
Well, I mean, the only reason that being on a gold standard is good is because you're not able to the price of gold doesn't change. It retains its value. Again, in the Kafir, you can see that the price of gold that government holds in all its vaults has a statutory price of $29.29. The market price has nothing to do with the actual lawful price. Again, lawful, illegitimate, right? Illegitimately, the Federal Reserve will take the gold certificates that represent that gold priced at $29 and use it to hypothecate at the market price. So it's in the best interest of the Federal Reserve to actually raise the price of gold because it holds the gold certificates, and therefore this $29.29 gold certificate can now be used as a collateral to get $3,000, and they have billions and billions of troy ounces to to make funny money with. So the whole thing is just completely out of control and ridiculous. The derivatives markets are in a figure that is higher than, I mean, it's quadrillion, zillion, whatever. It's
It's
not
a
even attainable.
it's a great representation, though, of this entire fictional realm, right? And why legalese is so important to them. Bear and I were talking yesterday about, well, really relating this all still to the robber baron's land grab that's been always going on, the landed gentry versus the plebes.
Mhm.
And it's a brilliant model for them, because when you have an inflationary system that is continually increasing the value of actual assets, which is property, allows them to use the funny money system to basically drive out those who have land. Say, like somebody who bought a home, we were talking yesterday about, say somebody bought a home in Encinitas, someone shouted out Encinitas in the chat, for $70,000 in 1969. Now it's worth it's worth $2.1 million because of the inflationary system. So now they've owned it, owned it outright for decades, but now their property tax is $25,000 a year. They don't have,
Congratulations.
yeah. So what's going to happen is they're going to have to sell, because now they're told, hey, it's worth 2.5 million. You should sell. So what happens is they end up selling to that landed gentry, BlackRock, who buys it and gentrifies the whole place. And now they're renting
Hmm.
somewhere as a retiree, right? And that they're not going to pass that land down to their, to the next generation.
And look, the truth of the matter is they can crash the market anytime they want. They can also write off all the debt anytime they want. It doesn't exist in reality, right? So the whole thing is just this giant system of control, as you say. And also, when you're talking about gold, everybody's excited that gold went up, but I'm like, well, toilet paper went up too. So, I mean, if I had toilet paper, my toilet paper actually went up more than gold. So, I mean, yeah, my meat went up, my milk, everything went up because, yeah, so you're not, by gold going up, all that's happening is the dollar is losing value. You got to understand that. It's not a good thing. Then you have the Bitcoin, which I get it. It seems like a great thing, but it's not. Government is starting GovCoin, and they're going to do the same thing because they can see how people just attach to what they think is decentralized, which it's not. It's now on, it's an absolutely controlled system behind the scenes. And so, with GovCoin, with Bitcoin that is GovCoin, they have no collateral whatsoever. They can do anything they want to the price, affect it to go up and down. But the problem is they know beforehand whether it's going to go up or down, And when the market goes down, that money is not just money was already created. It already has an existence. When the market goes down, they are collecting all the money that you're losing. Right? I
Something
mean,
dumb.
there's always two sides to every trade, right? You don't lose unless you trade. Well, so these guys look, the bottom line is they don't give a crap. Money is designed to control us. It puts a limitation on what we can do. They have no limitation because they have no limit to the money they can create. Whether that's in the form of derivatives, right, or appropriations. What's an appropriation? Congress gets together and said, okay, we're going to create this much debt, and it's automatically paid by the national debt. We just created another $1 trillion into the national debt because we're Congress and that's what we can do. But the whole thing is just absolutely absurd.
Just last week, Trump said, "Well, if the dollar losing value is not such a bad deal because we can make more money." It's uh, it's
Well,
it's astounding what they say out loud these days.
I know. Well, what you got to think about it now. What is the one product that any nation actually has? Money.
Yeah.
How is a country even looked at by its money? I mean, that's what a country. That's the only thing that a country actually produces. Everything else is produced by us. Yeah, they control us, they tax us, they do all that. They steal our ideas, they patent them. We have nothing, they have everything, but it's still us that's doing the production. What a government does is produce money. That's its business, commerce. Right? So commerce is the business of government. Everything else, like you said, is legitimate. Anything commercial is not. And that's where everything goes astray. So, anyway, you get the idea based on what they've been privatizing that this has a lot to do with when airports, ports, waterways. This has a lot to do with turning these things into private enterprises and then saying, well, now that it's private, we can just say that Customs and Border Patrol has no authority there. It's not that it doesn't have authority. It's still run by Customs and Border Patrol, but they look the other way. They don't search the containers that come in. They don't search. They don't go into your factory and see that you're holding whatever. They don't look in your trucks to see that you're importing children from Mexico to Canada or vice versa. This is their organized system of crime, and the crime that they're fighting is the crime that's happening outside of their jurisdiction, outside of these types of things. So they're, the cartels, they want to be the traffickers. They are the traffickers, and so there's a great benefit now, especially with tariffs. Everybody's all afraid of tariffs to move your company into a foreign trade zone. And the question is, how do you do that, right? And we'll cover that. So anyway, these are just privatized infrastructure assets. Obviously, not a good thing, but when we're living in the aftermath of this executive order. Remember, this was an executive order, not a law that is on the books at any other time than war or emergency. So this could all end. All this privatization could actually end if you got rid of the power of the president to declare law, or that is lawlessness, and replace it with Communist Manifesto. Another aspect of this is end user license agreements. You guys are signing end user agreements like they're, going out of style. Everything. The fact that you're on the computer today means you have signed some end user agreement. Google, Yahoo, Disney. Oh, well, speaking of Disney, are you guys familiar with? I don't know if I have that up here. I don't think I do.
I
You know,
saw a thing, if you were to actually try to read all the user agreements on your phone, it would take you like an entire year of just reading.
I've
Uh,
tried. I've tried actually, and some people actually have done it and put it up on the website. You would not be happy with what you've agreed to. The question is, are they enforceable? Because some of the stuff's so ridiculous. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you heard about the Disney case, where the family went to Disneyland and went to a restaurant in Disneyland or Disney World. I can't remember. I think it was Disneyland, and they, supposed to be. He was allergic to shellfish, and he got shellfish mixed in with his food and died at Disneyland because of poor food preparation. When he went to sue, when the family went to sue Disneyland, Disneyland said, "Well, we're sorry, but you signed an end user agreement when you signed up for Disney Plus." And that agreement said that you can never sue any Disney corporation or any of its affiliates.
So Disney Plus being, is that like their online
That's
media?
that's to watch movies online. Yeah.
Which is also connecting to the physical uh, world of going to the parks, huh? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, well, that's because you're signing an end user agreement, a contract essentially that you're agreeing to things that no person in their right mind would agree to. In this case, Disneyland cannot be sued by you, even if it kills you. You cannot sue as the family because the person that was killed signed a contract, and that includes the whole family because family is in the eyes of government is a corporation, right? Your kids are your agents. You're responsible. That's why the man always gets stuck with the bills. That's ancient law. They consider you a corporation, and when you sign that, hey, guess what? You've done it in commerce. You're in commerce when you go to Disneyland. Believe it or not, you've paid to enter their park and their property. You cannot sue Disney or any of its affiliate corporations, partners. That's a lot of companies, by the way. Now you're signing these things everywhere you go. You might not realize it. Grocery stores are starting to do it. Everyone's doing it because they're basically just like the free trade zones and foreign trade zones. They're avoiding all the laws that would protect you. Free trade zones, for instance, in other countries, there's no child labor laws, there's no labor laws, there's no civil rights, there's no unionization, there's nothing. And so the severely underpaid slave labor, basically, take Apple. Apple got caught using child labor. Well, okay, but they didn't do anything illegal. What they're doing is they're operating at a free trade zone where the laws of the country that zone is in, maybe Bangladesh, I don't know, wherever it was, don't apply. And so you can have child labor because there's no such thing as a child in, right? There's no age restriction. Um, and so Apple chose to have their phones, a moral choice to have their phones made by through child labor, basically. And again, there's that difference between the moral and the moral law, which should always supersede the legal, and the legal law, which is designed. I think the last thing I showed you on our last show was that document by government that said positive law, legal law, is always opposed to the law of nature, law of God, right? Moral law and legal law cannot mix. It's impossible. So the moral law is supposed to be there as the foundation of the legal law. The legal law should never be considered higher than that moral foundational natural law. But as we can see, that is not what the case. And so companies like Apple make their iPhones through child labor. They get from that free trade zone to there. They pay no tariffs, taxes, etc. Because they're using the free trade zones and foreign trade zones, special purpose districts, etc. Now, we as a moral society, or what used to be a moral society, should be saying no more iPhones. Sorry, you've just done the unthinkable. You're using forced child labor, or women, or whatever. You have just crossed the barrier of being a good steward of people, nature, etc. You are no longer a company that we are going to support. But I mean, come on, we're lining up in stores half a block down to get the new iPhone that comes out every year. And those children are put to work every day to make your new little iPhone.
All
Now,
powered by lithium batteries from,
yeah, oh
yeah.
yeah. Well, and yeah, there's no health care, there's no benefits, right? These things don't exist because you're not in the country. You're not under the law. You're in a zone that has literally private law. And that private law can be said. Now, in the United States, it's not so bad. But in these other countries that we're getting all these cheap products from, it's frickin' horrible. Um, so, yeah, end user lease agreements, again, everything you're signing, you are just take the Disney example, when you're signing Google, when you're signing up for all these things, I mean, I don't know what to tell people. Obviously, I would not be here right now doing this unless I clicked the button when I get my new computer and I'm all excited and I say, yeah, yeah, I agree, I agree. Everything now is coming with these things, and it's bringing you into international private law. Okay, so what is private international law? Deals with private relationships across national borders, all called conflictive laws in the United States. You're conflicting with the standards of practice of law. In other words, civil law, all that stuff that would protect you from really bad contracts. Examples of private international law topics include your family law. There you go. You know why things are so screwed up in the family law. Because you're not going to a court, you're going to a family law court, which is a private court. Commercial. Recognition of judgment, torts, contracts, etc. Private international law is a body of conventions, model laws, national laws, legal guides, and other documents and instruments that regulate private relationships across national borders. Private international law has a dualistic character, balancing international consensus with domestic recognition and implementation, as well as balancing sovereign actions with those of the private sector. United States domestic law's nearest equivalent is, again, conflict of laws or choice of laws. So you do have a choice. You cannot use the foundation of natural law, law of nature, law of God, whatever you call it, is the choice to say no. That is the only right you really, really actually have, is to not participate in commerce. Now, is that practical? Well, yeah, obviously the whole system has been built upon commerce. We either change and go back to that understanding, or we continue into this realm where everything will be privatized, run by the United Nations under international law. You will have no sovereign nation states anymore, because nation states are just states of the new nation state, which is United Nations. That is what's happening. It is very easily documented. It's very easy to discover that is what is happening. So, the problem with this is that also when you sign these agreements, they're almost always going to put you into a situation, and contracts do this too, of arbitration. Now, if you have an arbitration clause, that means that you've given up all rights to participate in your legal system, that is your normal jurisdiction, and you have agreed to either a private arbitrator, which are notoriously corrupt, and guess what? The company that you're signing that agreement with, Disney, Apple, whatever, chooses who the arbitrator is. And those arbitrators traditionally side with the corporation that's paying them money to be, right? And then they say you have to pay for the arbitration. So, I mean, you're giving up all your rights on a constant basis by signing all of these things. Now, sources of these model laws, uniform laws. So think Uniform Commercial Code. Big push to put the people in, oh, UCC. I got my UCC one and my. Now, guys, you're entering into a private system of law. You're screwing yourself. People are, declare all your property is in a UCC this or UCC, and it's all bunk. It's all. If you're in UCC, and go watch some videos on it. If you're practicing anything in the UCC, it has to be done so every dotted I and crossed T, it has to be done so perfectly that if you make one single mistake, it can void the whole thing and they can just take all you've put your property up as collateral. The only reason that UCC exists is for corporations. Corporations can use that to become first lien holders if you default on the contract. That's what it's for. It's not for common people. Okay? people point to it, these gurus that are trying to sell you on it, they point to some things that sound like natural law and they say, oh yeah, you want to be in this. No, it's not how it works, guys. It's just this is all corporate. And for you to participate in it means you're giving up any possible good thing that you might actually have, any protections of law that you might have. Well, the same thing with foreign trade zones. They are designed to rid that zone or area of the law. So you have no protections as an employee. Or, for that matter, the corporate entity that's taking advantage and employing, that means using the man or woman or whatever. International private law is law governing disputes between citizens of different countries and citizens against a foreign country. You don't want to be in international law. Disputes in international private law, again, private, commercial, are often solved via negotiation, arbitration, litigation, and a combination of these. So, yeah, for the most part, you're giving up the right to any kind of court, and you're going to a private company that calls itself an arbitrator, and the arbitrator is almost always going to not give you the decision that you want. Again, citizens, human or corporate. Did you notice that? Did you know that corporations are citizens too? They're people too, right? International law, let's see. Provisions of a private contract, etc. So this is that Disney case I was talking about. Disney wants wrongful death suit thrown out over Disney Plus EULA. This is your future, guys. Please read this provision carefully. That's you are agreeing to resolve all disputes between us through binding individual arbitration and include a class action waiver and jury trial waiver. So anybody that has Disney Plus has literally agreed to never use the judicial system and go to a private arbitrator of their choosing. Yes, even if they kill you. This is the story. I'll leave it up for a second if you want to read it. It's, pause this if you want to, but the Disney free trial would bar a customer's right to a jury trial. um, Explicity seeking to bar its 150 million Disney Plus subscribers from ever prosecuting a wrongful death case against it in front of a jury, even if the case facts have nothing to do with a Disney Plus company. I mean, this should be so outrageous to people that, again, no more Disney. Disney, remove this, or we're gonna cancel. And nobody should rightfully, in their right mind, continue in a contract such as this, knowing that this is the case. Now, I want you to understand, because this came out, Disney went ahead and settled the case because they don't really want this to get out yet. They want you to keep signing these agreements everywhere you go, everything you buy, because they don't want you to have any, they want you in this international thing that they're creating, private thing, so that you have no access to anything that would protect you. No laws, no nothing, no courts. And Disney's not alone in saying your clicks mean you can't sue. A lot of companies do that, etc. Harvard Law goes over this.
So, Clint, do you
Yes.
believe there is any way to create a clear demarcation between your avatar and the corporate world and your natural self and exist in both worlds at the same time?
I'll tell you, I had a great idea, but I don't, I don't know how to get it out there. When I say I want support, I wish people would use me and my ideas. I don't want monetary support. I want people to use me because I have all this knowledge and I want to be able to help people. We had this idea, and hey, someone steals the idea, great. At least it's out there. At least it's happening. You could actually create a company an unincorporated company. You can do that in the state. You don't have, doesn't have to be a federal thing. Just a pass-through thing that you're using to do business as, and you could sign up for Disney Plus in that corporation. It's a limited liability company, and therefore the all that clause would apply to the company. Well, the company doesn't go to Disneyland. The company doesn't do anything. You do. So when they try to say, "Well, you're a Disney Plus customer," you say, "Well, I'm not a customer. I'm Clint Richardson, but my company, my unincorporated limited liability company, is certainly a member, and you're welcome to apply that contract, that end user agreement, or whatever else." Everybody should basically have a second person, a corporate person, in order to do business, is my opinion. Because that's what they do, right? I'm not saying it's because it's a good thing. I'm saying this is how they protect themselves. Your congressmen aren't congressmen, they're corporations. You look them up. Look up Ron Paul. He was a corporation called Ron Paul while he was in while he was in Congress. They're acting when Enron got in trouble. The guys from Enron, they said, "Well, that's great. Okay, we're just going to get rid of our corporate identities, and now there's no one to put in jail because they're limited liability." You see, it's time that you start fighting fire with fire, and I hate to say that, but you really have no other options. If you're going to start a commune or a land, or you're in Jefferson County or whatever, you really need to form a trust, and that trust should have its own corporation, and that or unincorporated company, and everything you do should be through that instead of personally, right? This is how they operate. This is how they protect themselves. So you're what we're trying to do, and what we're always told to do, is somehow reinvent the wheel, right? Don't do as government does, do as we tell you to do, even though it's wrong and illegal. No, you don't need to reinvent these wheels. You don't need to reinvent the wheel to form a trust. They've been using trust since the dawn of time. Okay? Don't go to a guru on the internet to form a trust when you can go to who has no responsibility and no liability if you fail, and you will, when you can go to an attorney or someone that actually knows what they're doing, that will actually form the trust for you instead of you having to do it yourself, and then get it notarized and actually have a legitimate trust, right? But oh no, I'm going to go the conspiracy route, and I'm going to go to a guy who pretends that well, I had these mentors, I had the great men, and I know how to do it, right? Very few people actually know how to do it. And they'll recommend foreign trusts. Problem with foreign trusts is most countries don't recognize each other, either country's trusts. So you can form a trust, put your property that you have in Mexico in a trust, and when it comes time for your kids to take the trust, sorry, we don't recognize U.S. trusts. You got scammed, basically. So yeah,
And getting an EIN for a foreign trust means that most of the time people falsify
you do not want to do it.
a domicile, in some place like the Philippines or whatever. And I know a lot
Yeah.
of people are doing that. So I
You
would
got to be
refrain from
very,
that.
very careful. A lot of people that are
Yeah.
expatriating are now stuck in, say Thailand, who changed all their rules, seized all their bank accounts. You have to have a certain amount of money. You can retire in Thailand and live like a king. Well, guess what? They raised the prices. They seized all their bank accounts, charged them fees, and now these people that thought they were going to live the high life, retirees, are now actually stuck in places like Thailand and can't leave
Yeah,
because
well,
they
I'm
have no
talking
money.
about people domestically that
Oh,
create
sure.
a trust and say it's a foreign trust,
No,
and they falsify to get a foreign EIN, even
sure.
though they're still here. So that's a
Yeah,
little bit sketchy
the
too.
whole thing is sketchy. The so-called constitutional trusts don't exist. It's a lie. This is all left over from that it's just all tax protest stuff that's been going on for 60, 50, 60 years. Do not trust any of it. I beg of you, because you will get screwed in the end. If you're going to, look, the real lesson to be learned is that this is a controlled system. Anything you create as a legal, now a trust is a legal person, right? You're creating a person. You do not do that outside of their system. You can't have a private trust in the sense that it's private, right? The only privacy that you're getting is the ability to handle your assets without going to probate court. that doesn't mean that it's outside of the system or somehow sovereign, or that those things don't exist. There's no sovereignty. Okay? Sovereignty is for nations and God. You're either under God or you're you're a legal sovereign, but you are not sovereign. That doesn't exist. It's a lie. In order to be a sovereign, you have to rule over people. You have to have subjects. So you got to understand that all of these things that these gurus are selling out there, especially the ones where you have to do it yourself, they're all fraud. Foreign trusts are the last thing you would ever want to be in because, for the most part, other countries don't enforce the rights of trusts from other countries. So yeah, and the thing you're talking about, yeah, it's an absolute fraud that is listed on the websites under the sovereign citizen movement and all those different things. They're openly telling you this is felonious behavior. It's a felony to do these things. Now, for some reason, and I think it's a controlled opposition, these guys that are selling these things are never getting in trouble, right? Even though they acknowledge Anna von Reitz in court cases a complete fraud and a fake judge, she never goes to jail for giving bad legal advice. Neither does any of these other people. And then when you look at their court cases, after they tell you, yeah, I'm free, I don't pay any taxes, you look at their tax records, yeah, they're paying taxes. They lose their homes, they lose their children, they lose their... Do not follow this stream of things that we're talking about. Redemption, tax protest, trusts, all these things. If you're going to operate something legal, it is going to have to be in the system, and it's going to have to be done right, or it's going to not be. It's going to be considered. It has to pass what's called the court test, which is a legitimacy test. Can your trust, for instance, be handled in a probate court? If the probate court cannot look at your trust and say, okay, this is a proper trust, you have the right now to privately, administer your own trust, your own property, which is actually their property. um, if they can't look at that and say, okay, this is a proper trust that could be, lawfully, legally administered, then it's no good and it will go to probate. If probate cannot recognize it, cannot pass the court test and legitimacy test, you have a sham, what they call openly a sham trust. And there are so many sham artists out there having you do this. I know this only because I spent the last 3 years moving from being part of the so-called truth movement to realizing there's no truth in the movement. Because these all these scam artists that are just, they're learning from one person and then selling the same product, maybe a little different, calling it something different, but it's just all scam. And I can attest also that I believed some of these things were true. And that's why now I even wrote about them. I wrote histories that didn't exist because I believed the people that were telling me these things, the alternative radio. I guarantee you that most of the stuff that we believe, patriotically, etc., is not true, and verifiably so. And again, man, if you guys got questions about it, you can contact me. I have no problem showing you the source that says you're going to get screwed if you follow these people. So
Yeah, my experience is there's a lot of truth in these things, but then there's always an inherent gotcha.
well,
Um,
inherent is the key word. You have inherent rights, right? God-given rights, but you've abandoned nature, which is God, and you've taken legal rights. These are two different things. You cannot mix up inherent rights with artificial rights. Rights of persons, rights of men, they're two different things. So, yeah, there's a lot of truth going on if you were a man, but you're not. You're operating as a person. You're creating persons at law. You don't ever own a person. That's property of government. It's a status that they've given you. So the truth is over here. Reality, truth is not man-made. Everything else is legal. And when you start confounding and compounding and confusing and mixing natural rights with legal rights, you're always going to end up getting, you're not going to win or whatever it is you think you're going to do. You're not going to be free. You're not going to be do this. You're not going to leave the United States. You're not going to be a state national or a state citizen. And no, that's not how this works. I'm sorry.
But Clint,
And
isn't there a way though to still act in the private person to person using contracts and
honestly, honestly, when you say person to person, what you're missing is the again, what is also a person?
well, I meant sorry, that got caught in language. Man to living man or living man to living woman in the private, not
Yeah,
using their currency, not
sure,
yeah. So for instance,
sure.
like I've been a founder of this project called Cordal, where the idea was to create a completely separate digital infrastructure that doesn't use anything related to the World Wide Web or any contractual stuff. It's all open source. It's all been developed P2P. It's all, transparent. The currency is based on time. And the concept is that we can do everything in the private that has no relationship to the person or to the
Okay.
corporation.
All you have to understand about what privacy actually is that it is not being done in your legal name, which is
Exactly.
why I would open a company and do business in the company, which has a limited liability. Why would I want to do business as Clint Richardson and take all liability when I can have a corporate structure, which is unincorporated actually, if you're smart, you know what you're doing, and a trust and all these different things that can do it without any liability to myself, so that when anything goes wrong or some crime is committed without you knowing it, someone sues you, they don't sue you, they sue the limited liability company. And you keep your assets completely separate from that company. That is what privacy is, and that is how all the elite operate.
And it would be even more advantageous to open up that LLC under the auspices of a trustee.
Yeah, the trust
Yeah,
can actually have a company and a bank account and all that stuff. It
right.
is, remember, a trust is a person, but don't ever think that any of these legal things are not subject to the law of that which you're always in the jurisdiction. That's what actually gives you the limited liability. That's what gives you these protections. You're never operating privately from, right? But you're not operating in your own self, your own name. That's what makes what you do through the company or corporation or whatever private. That's what makes you private from your business dealings. Again, that's how all the elite and business world works. But privacy in the true natural sense, where you're actually separate from everything, well, sorry to tell you, but that only exists in the ways of religious actions, which is love, charity, forgiveness. Okay, you don't do commerce in nature. You give and you receive, but you never do business, trade, commerce. Okay, these are things that are under the Commerce Clause. The only exception that I would mention is that states are several means private from one another. What that means is that each state is private from each other and each state is private from the United States. Okay? Doesn't mean the United States, they're not under United States law. It means that if you do business in the state, okay, for instance, I'm in Utah, there's a gun manufacturer in Utah, I can buy the gun from the gun manufacturer and it can be a private sale because the gun never leaves the state, never enters into interstate commerce. That is a private transaction. If you do private transactions with only people in your state, well, then you're acting privately from the federal aspect of it, right? But once again, if you're using money, if you're using any part of the federal interest, federal money, federal this, then you got to be very, very careful. This is why I always have been promoting charity and forgiveness. Forgiveness means no court system. Charity means you don't need money. This is what you'd have to accomplish in order, you have to, in a true trust, not a a legal trust, but the legal trust is there to protect you legally, but underneath that trust, you have to be in a situation of love, charity, and forgiveness of people who want to actually be free from everything. And that means you're not using the property of government. You're not a user. You are a independent, and you're not in competition. You're not trying to start a new kind of currency, or you're not using the emblems and logos and protections of the federal government. Okay, that is what it means to be if you will, private within the state. Okay, but the second that you enter into any kind of commerce that is interstate, if I buy something from a foreign trade zone, if I buy something from a company like, uh, shoot, Amazon, that's interstate commerce. Even though their factory might be right there next to you, the company isn't. It's not incorporated in your state. You're using all this stuff, the internet, and all these different things to accomplish, and you're using money. So, yeah, this is the problem. I hate to say it, and I really, really hate to say that we need to go back to making our own crap, our own clothes. We need to grow our own food. We need to be self-sufficient if we're ever going to be private or free from this. And
Yeah.
again, that means no competition. No competition. No, no, we hate you. No, right? What we're doing now would have to stop. We cannot be part of the internet. We cannot be part of we'd have to literally revert to a time and a place that is free from all the things, all the end user agreements, all the legal stuff, so that we are not participating. Now, again, monasteries, they operate oftentimes, hey, beer, cheese, right? How are they doing that and remaining free from well, they have an import-export company that does all the legal stuff, leaving them to practice their religion, their dedication to God and nature and prayer and whatever it is that they're set up to do. That's what we would have to do.
Absolutely agreed. And I'm an optimist. I believe someday we will get there because the predator system being against the laws of nature is going to eventually collapse in on itself. So, Clint, my question is, we're talking about a part two. So could you briefly tease out what part two of this discussion will, cover when we
Well,
have you
we've
back?
we've barely even gotten into the foreign
Yeah.
trade zone part of it. This was mostly just the
Uh-huh.
background leading
Right.
to it. But you now understand, at least briefly, or vaguely, what a foreign trade zone is. I will give you a little hint here, though, as to how this works. Um, just got to get to it here. I want to show you my foreign trade zone. I told you this is a huge thing I put together because I still can't believe that it's true. Um, da, 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 da. And I'm happy to send this present. We don't have to go through this whole thing. I'm happy to send this to you, and you can post it as say a PDF or something along with the show if you guys want to do that. And that way people can read these things, like this, for instance, how free trade zones can drive illicit activity. Well, you just got done telling you that they developed a constitution-free zone to prevent illicit activity, and now they're saying, well, we're going to do illicit activity is mostly happening in foreign and free trade zones, and it's so mind-boggling. Okay, so let's just end with this, okay? U.S. foreign trade zones, right? These are all ports, okay? And this is actually an old map, but you get the point. You can see how many zones there are. These are airports and other kinds of train ports and that kind of thing. Stuff where rail or freight or stuff is coming in either from vehicle, airplanes, etc. Okay, these are all foreign trade zones. These are all lawless areas, essentially. All right, there's a bigger view. Now, what happens when I look at this? Okay, 100-mile border zone, and I compare it. Look at all the free trade zones that are first of all in that within that 100-mile border. Like look at where I am, Utah. There's one. There's probably two now, but there's one. All right. Look at Utah and look at that blue dot, and I'm going to show you what that actually is. Okay. Now, talking about unauthorized immigrant populations by county and region, why in the hell? Because I'm going to solve a riddle for you. Why would the government import a bunch of illegal aliens, as they call them? Okay, here's a look at the greatest population of illegal so-called aliens, foreigners without permission to actually have residence in the states or United States. Okay, and we start looking at the free trade zone. You seeing that? You seeing where the free trade zones are? The blue dots compared to the immigration. You see that? How about Texas? Why are they shipping all these people to these major cities and these ports? Well, look at where the ports are. Look at where the things are, right? Why are these immigrants ending up in these places? Yeah. Oh, gee, I wonder why. It's because they can work not even legally. They can work outside of the United States while being in the United States, according to Customs and Border Patrol. Take IKEA. IKEA could import a bunch of Swedes because it's a Swedish company illegally, and those Swedish people could live wherever in the zone and work in that free foreign trade zone and not be illegal, right? Why do you have so many illegal aliens walking around your city? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you why. Okay, here's Utah again. There's the foreign trade zones. That dot is a bit off, I believe. Here's where I live. Okay, I'm down in, there's the P. The P is the Salt Lake City International Airport. Okay, that is the foreign trade. That is the hub of the foreign trade zone. That is an international law, constitution-free zone port. Okay, notice that the 80, which is a cross-country freeway, goes right through. And then our other, I'm having a brain fart here, what our other north-south freeway is, 15, I think. Anyway, so I live down there where it says Sandy, Harriman, Alpine. The question is, and we didn't get to this yet, what constitutes a free trade zone? A free trade zone is this. In each direction of the port, it goes out a certain amount of miles. In this case, I believe it's 120 miles circumference. Okay? So if I look at that, this is the free trade. This is considered the free trade zone, or the foreign trade zone of Salt Lake City Airport. Okay? Notice that it covers all of the southern area, the southern county, which is Utah County, Salt Lake County, and up into the next county where, okay, so Ogden up there is about a hour and a half drive, and see, Santaquin down there is about an hour drive from where I am. Okay? That gives you an idea of how large this zone is. This whole area right here, all of Salt Lake City, the whole county, even the lake, the Salt Lake, right? This is all considered a foreign trade zone. This means that anywhere in this zone, a business can join up with the foreign trade zone board, create a business, or transfer your business into the zone. Even though I have a business in the Salt Lake area, that doesn't mean I'm actually in the zone. It's a zone that only includes those that are members in the zone. Okay? That means I can operate without customs. I can ship things. I can destroy things. I can do everything but sell my product. And I'm not going to get any tariffs. I'm not going to get any duties. I'm not getting any taxes because I'm operating outside of the United States. This whole area that I live in is considered outside of the United States for certain privileged businesses. And what they're doing, the reason they're creating these tariffs is to say, hey, you don't, which again, I have this all in this presentation. The reason that they created the tariffs and why Elon Musk was gung ho about the tariffs, because you'd think he'd pay a lot of tariffs, is because they all operate through foreign trade zones. They're not paying tariffs. They're transporting goods to and from zones, putting them together in certain zones, selling them in other zones in other countries, never paying tariffs or paying tariffs only on the final product, duties. But when you look at the receipts I have in here, they're paying $0 in duties, whereas every other company and every other person that lives in this zone, and I want to say it's 120 or 150 miles, I can't remember. Everybody in this zone is paying for all the customs and things that we normally are accustomed to, but the select few businesses that operate here that are in the foreign trade zone pay none of that. These are the big companies, the big pharmaceuticals. And then when you look at the drug trafficking, the people trafficking, the amazing amount of crime that is happening in these zones that is well documented, you wonder why we have a fentanyl crisis. You wonder why we have human trafficking like we've never had before. You wonder why we have so many things going wrong. Well, guess what? It's because of this. They imported people from other countries. Now, when you look at free trade zones in other countries, this is the part that's so hard to grasp, but in every free trade zone, they import workers from other countries, illegal workers, into the country. So if I'm in Bangladesh and I have a free trade zone, I don't use Bangladeshi workers. I use workers from, say, I don't know, whatever the next country over is, Moroccan or whatever. I get the lowest of the low class and I import them and I give them a slave labor job where they have no rights, no privileges, no protections, no nothing, no health care, no benefits, right? It's slave labor, but it's technically voluntary because they have no other options. But the weirdest part about this is that in every country, including this one, all these foreign trade zones, free trade zones, special economic zones, whatever, they're importing the workers because these zones are not considered part of the country. Now, let's go back and let's see if I have that here. This thing right here. Let's see if I have that somewhere else here. There it is. Okay, here's your map again. Here's your map. Here's all your free trade zones. Obviously, the population zones and where they were shipping all of those illegals, those are the biggest foreign trade zones. Every single place where the government was shipping illegals is a foreign trade zone. That thing in Utah, that is the circumference of the zone I'm talking about. Okay, every foreign trade zone has that circumference. So if you put that mark, that equidistant circumference as a circle, right, and you put it on every foreign trade zone that's marked here, right, marked here, how much of the country is no longer part of the country for the special privileged businesses like Tesla and automobile makers and other pharmaceuticals? They're operating in a way that they have no regulation because they're not operating in the United States. And yet they're right next door to you, to your airports. They're traveling on your freeways that your tax dollars built, which are now called virtual waterways, and they're never entering into the United States. They're trafficking drugs, people, guns, everything else. And that's why I wanted to present this to you guys today, because of all the things that I've uncovered, this was by far the most mind-bending journey to understand how it worked and to understand that this is all about using foreign workers and taking away the rights of the lowest class of people, including all the migrant farm workers that work in the United States. 50% of the farm workers in the United States are illegals. They come here on the visas of the right. Well, this is all part of that plan. This is all part of that uh, disgusting human trafficking, right? Because the farms, especially, are still stuck in the forced labor system. They're still stuck in the slavery. They cannot pay wages, right? This is why Americans don't want to do the work because the wages are so low, because otherwise they wouldn't be in business. They're
Clint,
subsidized.
this is such critical information, Clint, and I don't know of anybody else. I haven't heard anybody else break it down like this. I would imagine even a lot of our esteemed politicians don't even understand at this level.
Well,
Um,
I don't know about
or maybe they do.
that.
Well,
Well,
I just don't give their intelligence that much credit to, follow all this. So I really would love to do a part two where we can just do justice to this foreign trade zone because it's quite an education for myself. A lot of us know that things are screwed up, but to have it broken down on this level is just phenomenal. And I'd love to just help get this level of information out.
Well,
We really need it.
I again, I very much appreciate it because again, it's very hard to find a platform where people are willing to actually listen. And again, I really want to make this, imagine that all of these dots are 150 mile zones.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The information is mind bending
It
for
is.
some of us that have been at this for a while. So I really look forward to a part two. We'll get you back as soon as we can while this is kind of fresh, and
Sounds
then
good.
just start here and really get into it.
All
And
right.
I have a lot of questions. Yeah, just a lot of questions on how possibly some of us small business folks could, take advantage of some of this information as well. So thank you so much for your generous time here and all this phenomenal work. Um, any last things that you'd like to say, Mike or Clint?
Well, I will say that the reason when I found out about this, I had that same thought. I was like, well,
Uh-huh.
gee, I want to open a business here. What do I have to do? So I called the city. And you know what the city sent me the emails of who I need to contact. Guess who it was?
Who's that?
The Rockefeller Foreign Trade Zone Commission.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. What do you think the World Trade Center is?
Ah, hmm.
Yeah. Where the Rockefellers build all the World Trade Centers? Foreign trade zones.
Wow.
Yeah, that's now we know what the World Trade Center is. Yeah, remember this has been going on since 19 what 30 what I say 34 or something like that. So it's
Well,
been building and we are
well,
at the precipice and you're either gonna stop supporting these companies or you're not. And depending on people's ability to stop being addicted to stuff, cheap stuff, we are already in globalism. It's already happened. The question is, will the few of us that really want to leave or exit this thing be able to and be able to give all this up? And if not, well, then you might as well embrace it and understand it and live in it and accept it. Um, or either way you're going to have to because if you're going to go against it or try to separate yourself from it, you're going to have to be knowledgeable of it so that you don't fall into its traps. So either way you have to be informed. It's not enough though to be in the truth movement and talk and then go, I'm going to go watch my Disney Plus Marvel, right? Government owned companies. It's not enough just to talk about it. This is so alarming to me like you said, it's just I can't believe it myself sometimes. So
Well,
thank
information
you.
is still power, and the more of us that are onto this, I can't help but think something will come of it. So thank you again. Thank you.
No, thank you guys. You guys, I think you're a rarefied part of this whole thing. You guys are great. I love you.
Love you too.
All right, man.
Thanks so much, Clint. And guys, you can go support Clint and his work and his shadow band work at privateunderground.club. Links in the show notes, and we'll have him on for part 3 of this soon. And remember to get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something, go show Mother Nature some love. She'll show it right back in spades. We'll see you next week, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Love you all.
Take care.
Peace.